Kia ora everybody, what's up? It is Robett Hollis here. Welcome to the Connect series powered by My Business Live. Today we're talking about digital adoption, and what better person to jump on to talk about it today than BNZ's head of technology, the brains, the man behind it all, Tim Wixon. How are you, mate?
Thanks, Robett. Very well, thank you. Nice to be here.
Okay. So maybe we'll start off with this. You know, COVID brought us a pretty interesting tipping point of this intersection where it hit every single community, every bit of commerce, every bit of culture, the whole thing in one sort of hit. And a really interesting bit straight off the bat would be a massive gap it felt between the technology and the tools and everything that was out there to actually be able to help businesses. Before we get on to right into the weeds in it, at a full macro zoomed out, when you look at digital adoption for businesses in New Zealand, what do you think the handbrake is that's stopping a lot of businesses get better in Aotearoa?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is just, and there's a bit of research around it as well, is cost, familiarity, and just knowing where to start. So, you know, from the vantage point I have across a whole range of different technology industry businesses and software as a service and platforms and apps that businesses can use, there's so many choices out there. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of options. It's quite hard to navigate. It's also quite hard to navigate the value that you can derive and what those would actually mean from your business perspective in a very real sense. I think if you relate it to COVID, there's a couple of things. One is a lot of people had to use or get up that digital adoption curve pretty quickly. If you think about trying to keep your staff engagement going, keep in touch with people, keep some culture going in lockdown, and we've been pretty lucky in New Zealand. It's been different globally, but also just access to your customers and thinking about changing business models. And we saw a lot of it during COVID from a bank-wide perspective across a lot of industries, right?
Yeah, so on that, right, like when COVID locked down, one of my buddies runs the commercial side of one of New Zealand's big real estate companies, and he was saying the biggest stress I've got right now for me and my business is to try and educate hundreds of 40 to 50-year-old crew that they don't even know what Microsoft Teams is, they don't know Google Hangouts, they don't know Skype. It's just like pen and paper and like really, really old school. So I think you kind of validate the fact of, you know, it's a cluttered market. They don't know where to look to, they don't know who to trust, they don't know the nuances of all the different bits. So now to rewind it all the way back, with your role with head of technology, and you kind of said it before, Tim, at a macro, in a quick nutshell, what do you do to help businesses with this integration of tech, and where do you sort of look and play in the market? Like, how do you help New Zealand businesses through tech? Just so for those that aren't aware of, you know, the role and what you do and how it all works.
Yeah, great. So I might just zoom out even a bit further from that question to frame that up. So a couple of big things or opportunities we see from a bank perspective are helping both financial literacy and capability and digital literacy and capability. And increasingly the crossover between those two is getting more and more, right? And it's both from a person and personal use perspective and also from a business use perspective. And if you think about your example with 40, 50-year-old builders, there are a range of softwares, and I think they're getting better. And so the user experience, and that's the value proposition that those businesses have to find in order to be used and adopted by the example of the business you gave, but every business, right? So it has to be a better experience than pen and paper, and it has to be easy enough that you don't need to ask questions or have an instruction manual. It needs to be intuitive, good user experience, good user design. So if I put my hat on in the head of technology industry's role, if we're financing a business and we're looking at what good like, it's those businesses that are acquiring customers really quickly, and the value proposition is some sort of core or business critical often, and you can get in terms of some of the lag indicators, if you like, but they keep their customers, they retain them, the utilization or the amount that users use technology increasing all the time, and you can get down to that level of data if you really want to assess what's going on. And those are pretty good indicators of the value proposition. And if you think about your example with 40, 50-year-old builders, there are a range of softwares, and I think they're getting better. And so the user experience, and the proof points, I guess, of how easy and useful a technology is. And then, if you put it in a bank context a bit further down the track, you see that convert to revenue. So customer utilization and usability. And so I think that there's an increasing amount of adoption, and there's some good examples in that construction space that really are making it more of those ups. Many people that are playing with pen and paper can take some of that away and doing that's what you love doing, I think, too.
Yeah, when you look at the ecosystem, especially in the tech world, as soon as you do a little bit of Googling there's a million different plugins, a million different APIs, a whole bunch of different third-party stuff, subscription everywhere for everything. It gets quite overwhelming if you don't understand the tech landscape at all, right? Or if you're just, you're more of an old school sort of business. So it kind of feels like there's this overarching sort of layer of maybe fear and unknown from these business owners trying to figure out what to do and how to do it, right? Like it's almost fear driven of they don't understand the technology, so they just like, I don't know what to do. What do I do now? It kind of becomes almost like fear driven commerce. How do you think from a mental perspective, a lot of these businesses, like what are the first steps to try and get a bit braver in understanding the upside that technology can have for their business? Like how do they start to change their thinking and their approach and the strategy for their business to try and make it better? How do you think that a bigger collective of New Zealand businesses can try and do that?
Yeah, so I think about that in two big parts. One of them is why think about digital at all, and hopefully a lot of business owners are past that point. And I'll cover that off in a little bit of detail as well. But and then the second part is how. So how to get started. Where do I start? Who do I talk to? How do I even think about which apps, softwares might be relevant to what I do? And so I guess starting with that first one, there's a lot of research, and I can talk to observation and anecdote as well, but there's a lot of research that says that use of digital tools and use of apps and software and cloud software tools for businesses that you generate or have access to more customers, more revenue, generate revenue, and you get more return doing things like family, hobbies, sports, learning, whatever else you like to do in your spare time. And I guess New Zealand as a whole, if you think about that fear comment and thinking about the New Zealand context, has been relatively low on the productivity curve by any global measure, especially for developed countries. And so, business owners at the moment spend more time working for less return on average than business owners all around the world. And that's kind of a big opportunity, I think, to I guess improve both our welfare and business quality, but also just the time that business owners have and times that one limited resource everyone has, right? And you don't know how much as well. So the next part. So if you buy into the why do it, and I think most businesses for a good portion have had to use during COVID, the like Zoom or even emails a technology, right? And maybe you've got some cloud accounting software, and I think one of them is there's a range of very niche softwares that play in different markets. There's examples in construction services. There's some that are more relevant to retail, and if you're exporting that are relevant to accessing customers in offshore markets. And there's just to name a few. And so I think we feel as a bank that we've got a big part to play in that, and there's a couple of components to that too. So one of them, and Paul Conway, our chief economist, has done some great work on a digital pledge project, and there's probably more that you can see around that outside of this forum. We're financing the cutting edge and a whole range of those software companies that the rest of the New Zealand business market can utilise. And then the other one is really this My Business Live platform, where where that's a real investment from, and we want to do more in that space, is to try and help to do the likes of curating and thinking about the apps and softwares that businesses could think about using. And then if you really break it down and make it useful and real to particular businesses, it's going, well, if you've got 1 to 5 staff or 5 to 20 staff, here's a range of software or apps that you should think about or could think about plugging into your business and here's some examples of other businesses that have done it and what it's meant for them. And so trying to help with that, taking the fear away, but also just and we have those kind of conversations, right? We end up being really close to the businesses, and you can kind of see where there's opportunities to be more efficient often as a banker as well. And so I think that My Business Live platform's a really interesting opportunity to help with that, I guess, to use your turn of phrase, take away some of that fear, but also to show and demonstrate some of the upside. And I think if we really cracked it, it'll be also showing how you benchmark against other businesses. And also then if you take that all the way through to what we do as our bread and butter is how that, or what that means in terms of access to capital or financing you can get from a bank, as an example.
So on that, right, like when you look into, say, digital marketing, there's, Facebook or YouTube, whatever, there's a lot of different things you need to be tracking. There's a lot of different pieces. As far as My Business Live thing, and a one-stop shop is an overarching dashboard. I think the key to any of this is if your headspace can get kind of overwhelmed with the amount of stuff, but it's all in one sort of clear spot. I think that's probably the key automated piece, right? If you can have an overarching real-time dashboard look of view at your business, that will give you more insights that you can work with your different partners on, whether it be your marketing crew or sales or HR or accountants or bankers, whatever it may be. I think that the ease to be able to consolidate all that information in one is pretty critical. And the reality is, that they're saying, I think, in New Zealand, 97% of businesses in New Zealand are small businesses with staff under 20. I'm imagining that's probably a pretty powerful thing to be able to do. What percentage of people in New Zealand do you think aren't probably leveraging technology the way they could to be able to create more efficiencies and essentially profit in their business to save them more time? Like in your view, with all the different stuff that you've seen, how big is the opportunity for businesses to do better by utilizing technology in New Zealand, in your opinion?
Yeah, so in my opinion, and I'll use a couple of things that might not be fully accurate on the research, but I think it's about a fifth of businesses don't use any technology or software or apps at all. So that's an obvious part. There's also a pretty big divide between the leading edge of tech businesses and a divide between how much technology larger businesses use versus smaller. So if you're talking around the SMEs and those 1 to 5, there's a pretty big opportunity there. I think but I think it's also changing. It's just changing a little bit more slowly than it could. And so I think that something like 2/3 of SMEs will have, or business 1 to 5 will have some use of apps, and I think it's a little bit less that use sort of 4 or 5. And so I think you've also picked up on quite an interesting, which is not a question, but there's also being able to just narrow down and think about, you can overcomplicate it as well. So do you need 15 apps? Possibly not. Depends what your business looks like. And I think that's part of the education piece and knowledge piece. You don't need to track 100 things. There's probably 3 or 4 that really, really matter, perhaps, and maybe that's what their dash, but it's not their dash, and then some form of thinking around what really matters. And I think there's always a risk of tracking too much stuff, but you do need to track some things that really matter and just sort of know what those are and have a really good feel for what they are as well. So for businesses, a lot will be able to know what those things are intuitively, and if you track those somehow, great. Don't know what those important things are, then perhaps it's talking to your banker, or it might be another trusted advisor that you have. Either way, it is to be able to distill those things that really, really matter for what you're doing. And then there's some really just base technologies that are kind of interesting, right? So going back to those ones where you can keep connected to your staff, and even I guess the other two things I always think about is that if there's a bit of a talent shortage for businesses that want to grow from that 1 to 5 to that kind of 6 to 20 or 21 to 100 staff or whatever it is, thinking about the ability to have flexibility around where they're based and what technology can allow for that as well. And so I think that's quite an exciting proposition for New Zealand companies too. And maybe it's not just within New Zealand, right? You might be able to tap into some global leaders that play in your space in any market around the world.
It's an interesting one that Spot you said 20% of businesses don't actually use any tech whatsoever. It's almost quite scary to think about the opportunity or the amount that potentially has been lost in revenue or business growth or whatever it may be just from by absolutely nothing. So there's clearly a bit of a gap. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you, if you were to know in all that you do about tech and the big opportunity for New Zealand businesses to engage more than technology and kind of build a better bridge for this digital divide, if you were to magically put your little Wixon little sprinkle dust all over New Zealand businesses, what would success look like in your mind? What would that look like in a world of digital perfection for business, or not even perfection, but what if you sprinkle dust, what would it look like for New Zealand businesses?
Yeah, so I think the nirvana state is that you see that overall productivity increase across the country, right? And so for less energy and less stress and people having more time, they're getting more return from their business. That's on the personal front. But I think for business, I mean, it'd be great to see every business using the 5 or 6 or 10 or 11 or whatever the number is, apps that really make a difference to achieve that less energy, less stress returns kind of idea. Then I think the other thing is just seeing that what that allows is more flexibility, more options. I think I'd love to see more businesses being able to go into global marketplaces as well. So just the ability of technology. One, if you're getting better returns, you've got capital to reinvest in growth. That's quite interesting. Maybe that can be launching into an international market, but also just using technology to access international markets is pretty exciting from New Zealand. So even if you're a small business and just thinking about it, the ability to take away that geographical divide using technology and online marketplaces or whatever the forum is that you need or could sell through gets pretty interesting. The other ones, if you pare it back and just go for something that's super simple in between, if you get more efficient on just your billing cycle and invoicing, it's almost just having more cash and less stress just on those day-to-day things as well. So I think there's some quite big things that you can achieve, but there's some quite just meaningful day-to-day things I think you can achieve by clever use of technology. And I guess my last one is if you really crack it, depending on how much you love paper and pen and pencil, it'll be great to wipe out a whole lot of that, right? That's kind of interesting. The more you can automate, the less time you spend on those sort of things.
I get it. And as well, okay, so maybe let's finish with this. If you're one of the 5 businesses, one of the 5 businesses in New Zealand who do not currently use technology, you've seen this, you're watching it, you're realizing that there is a lot of upside for you to save more time and make more money and business more profitable and more oversight and data, all the rest of it. What would the first thing you'd do be from this point? You watch it, you get it, you're hyped, you want to make changes. Step 1 would be what?
Yeah, I think step 1's just talk to someone who you think is further up that digital capability curve if you have some fear about it. The other one is just start if you're comfortable. Plug something in, have a go, do a free trial for 90 days, even pay something, the value that you get in return really stacks up anyway. But yeah, either just start, or if you're afraid of starting, just ask someone for some advice or help that's further up. Talk to another business or a peer or a trusted advisor advisor, talk to your banker. That's great, right? And if you want to find some stuff through us, then search for us as well. It's we're again keen to help. We just see such a big opportunity in this space. So
there you go. Really appreciate your time, Tim. I know you're a very busy man. You've got lots of stuff going on with the head of technology. Technology is coming from everywhere. You've got to try and filter through it and make businesses in Aotearoa better. So really appreciate your time, man. Thanks heaps for joining in the mix. People want to check out more, you can My Business Live, whatever. Right below, we'll chuck in some links so you can get into the mix. Thanks for your time, buddy. Appreciate it. This has been the Connect series powered by My Business Live, talking about digital adoption 2021. Go check it out. Appreciate your time. Cheers, Tim.